There are three components to what Cloninger calls spirituality: self-forgetfulness, transpersonal identification, and what he calls mysticism. Spirituality is all about inner experiences. Religion, he says, that is observable behavior. Religion is exterior. So is somebody religious? They may say so, they may say not. Let me watch them for a couple weeks and I'll know. How often they go to pray in church or synagogue or wherever they go to pray? Do they pay their dues? Do they give charity according to their religion's teachings? Do they eat this and not that, if it's that kind of religion? Do they pray before they eat? Do they do pujas? Do they go to satsangs? That's religion. And you can see easily if somebody's religious or not. Spirituality is much harder to see, which is why we need the lens of our neuroscientists to help us understand the real mechanisms and workings of spirituality. All the tests show this. Someone who has a spiritual life has much better healthcare outcomes than someone who doesn't. Right? It's got to do with stress and the chemistry of the brain and how meditation or chanting breaks down the stress in certain chemicals, and the relation between stress and illness is profound. So it is not a mystical thing that having a spiritual life makes one physically healthier. A. B. Being religious also produces good results in recovery from diseases, in lower incidence of morbidity, and all the measures of health. People who are either religious or spiritual score better than people who are neither. But, I think you can predict the next sentence, those who say they are both spiritual and religious do much better than only one. And it's entirely comprehensible. Because the one who is spiritual, they can engineer their brain. That sounds radical. They can reshape their brain to overcome stressors, the biochemistry of stress. Those things can be broken down simply from the calming effects of chanting, of meditation, and a sense of destiny in life. Religion offers something else entirely that is good for health comes. It offers a network of friends, because all religions have communities. No one, and that's maybe a provocative statement, no one is religious alone. Spiritual, yes. Religious, no. Being religious is being part of a community. So if you have a health crisis in your family, you have other people take care of your children. There's some church or a group that's going to help you pay your bills to get you over your problems. You can talk to somebody, you can emote, you can share, and all those things are very, very important for how we're constructed as well. So while religion and spirituality, according to Cloninger, are very, very different animals, their combination is most powerful. Now, rather quickly. Now, let me just briefly talk about a couple of ideas in neuroscience today, ideas you're going to learn a lot more about. And one of the most important ideas for this spirituality, understanding what is spirituality, is what's called brain mapping. I mean, we can do amazing things. We can look inside the skull and see how the brain's working, or at least, if not how it's working, where it's working. That when we're doing chanting or meditation, is one part of the brain, and you'll learn all about the parietal and temporal and all these lobes and stuff in the next few days. And when we're praying or we're going to church or doing something repetitive, it's a different part of the brain when we're reciting prayers. So we can actually see when someone is reporting a spiritual state, different parts of the brain are active than when we're not being spiritual or when we're being religious. There's a lot of work on Zen meditation where, when a child is born, the two halves of the brain are still fused together. And when it comes up with a language or food or whatever its brain is dealing with, the firings in the brain they seem random. They're all over the place. And it's only when the halving of the brain takes place that you get a separation and really a sense of self or ego or separation develops. So a child, and I heard this being discussed over dinner tonight, doesn't know self from other. Quite literally doesn't know it. Right? So too, when one goes in one of John Lilly's sensory deprivation tanks, if anybody remembers that business, or if one is in meditation, or if you're in the Tibetan tradition, you go into a cave for 3 years, 3 months, and 3 days in meditation, the firings in the brain are very similar to the firings in a child's brain. And look what good sense that makes. If the idea behind these spiritual traditions is to overcome or lose the sense of self, we can map that today. We can see that happen. I'm excited by that. And if I were young, I'd become a neuroscientist. A little late, but that's what I want to be. The one other idea I'm going to mention that I think is remarkably important is called brain plasticity. And this is really, if anything, a link between religion and spirituality. And it goes like this. When you do an action over and over and over, you actually repattern your brain. You change the physical structure of your brain when you do things over and over. You know, there's an old adage, to learn any complex skill takes 10,000 hours. Have you heard that? If you want to learn to be a really good piano player, 10,000 hours. A good basketball player, 10,000 hours. A good meditator, 10,000 hours. That's about how long it takes to develop one of these very high-level skills. Right? Why? Because in that much time, you actually, and you'll hear about it, don't take my word, I'm not a neuroscientist, it actually changes the pattern, the structure of the brain itself. The brain is plastic. That's why when a terrible thing like Representative Gifford gets half her brain blown out, she can train the other half of her brain to take over those functions because the brain is very plastic. It's very remarkable. Very remarkable. It also answers one question I've always had from my childhood. You all know, I'm sure, that Ludwig van Beethoven, arguably the greatest musical composer ever, or certainly one of them, was deaf. Now, didn't you wonder, how does he write music like that when he's deaf? He can't hear it. Yes, he can. Here's brain plasticity. So you're learning one of these complex skills like playing a piano. So what happens is your finger hits this key, sound waves come into your ear translates those sound waves into pulses that go into your brain somewhere, and in the brain somewhere you hear. Hearing doesn't happen in the eardrum, it happens with what the eardrum conveys into the brain. Right? Same thing with seeing. We don't see with our eyes, we see in our brain. There's these old studies where if you give somebody glasses upside down and everything goes upside down, within a fairly short time, a day or two, they'll see everything right side up again. That is, the brain will adjust what the optical nerve and what's coming in. So you don't hear in the ear, you hear in the brain. You don't see in the eye, you see in the brain. All right. So I'm learning to play piano. I don't play. I wish I did. You learn to play piano. This note, I hear it. Now, after 10,000 hours, or whatever the right number is, you can totally short-circuit the ear. So piano players, often when they don't want to disturb people, will have a mute keyboard, right? It's like an electric keyboard that's not plugged in. So they can practice the fingering with no sound. But here's the thing. When piano players do that with no sound, they hear it. They hear the notes that you and I don't. So, how could Beethoven write this ethereal music with ears that don't work? He could hear anyway. Isn't that amazing? Well, you know, if you practice something long enough, you get right to it. So think about it. Now, if you go to your church or wherever it is that you go and you do something over and over again, daily, a few hours a day, for 20, 30 years, you get very good at it. And when I say you get good at it, the repeated behavior triggers directly certain synapses in the brain that can produce what we're calling sense of oneness with the universe or loss of self. So, and that, spirituality, it can come spontaneously. You can anybody can go out in the woods sometimes and just have that, this beautiful sunset tonight. You can have a spiritual experience, but it's not replicatable. You can't do it again so easy. Back in the old days, people used to try to do that with drugs. And it came the same problem. Yeah, that may be the same experience. I don't know. But you can't take it. You can't keep getting high. It just doesn't work that way. But with discipline and practice, right, you can, once you learn tentatively to trigger some of those insights and openness of meditation or prayer, those experiences can come spontaneously and easily, just as Beethoven can hear music with his mind, not with his ears. So I really am excited, eager to hear how the brain works from the study of neuroscience and philosophy of mind, and from the religious traditions of Judaism, Zen Buddhism, and Hinduism. I think we're going to learn a lot now. I thank you very much for your attention.